Yeah,
I work
this
down
time.
I work at Oval campus, so that's a busy job. And then like just creative stuff in the evening. It's like when do we time to do anything else?
I have to make time for it.
We go through like just kind of like rush periods of reading, I guess. So I haven't actually sat down and read anything properly in probably like 3 or 4 months because I'm focused on like working on my own book. And I think what's a good thing is one of
Yeah.
I've been trying to write it since 2012, but
Can't take a still.
so it's National Novel Writing Month right now, so I can get to 50,000 words by the end of the month, which is realistically only at most a quarter of the entire story that I want to write. But if I can get to like
This one? I've read this one.
Even if you hate it,
I've read a little.
I don't know. I just
That's,
well, it's a story that like I've been
That's
we have to much of it.
obsessed with finishing since like 2011 or so, because that's like when I also
Yeah.
it's actually so I mentioned your horror series, so I like because I couldn't finish it because it was too expensive to like make a video series, and like good effects. So I was like,
I'm sure some will see
I do
that.
horror effects.
Yeah.
You can't see the
confusing.
front of
we
the
have
podium.
so we have my household is all like creative people, so we've got all of us have our own
It'll do.
web series.
It's just mainly need to see him here.
Yeah.
And so we had like costumes, we had sort of a makeup person and
Oh, yeah.
artists,
That's,
like, just
first
all
one.
different things. It's like, even with all of us, it's just like, so we're gonna make a series, alright, so we have $5,000? None. That's
How much do we have? $12.50.
Yeah. Oh, right, so that's right, we're all artists. So eventually it's just like, whatever, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it into a book, but
Yeah. The second
it's
one.
like, how do you turn a vlog style web series?
Yeah, third and fourth. It's
Don't think, just make it.
No, I've never seen it all.
That's the stuff like that.
Yeah. So once I like finish it, I'll probably
Oh, yeah.
at least self-publishing it.
really curious.
Oh yeah,
Like a connection.
possibly use like 15
Because he does
years
have
ago,
a
and
house.
reading everything he's written ever
Kind of
since.
like,
And there's that, I read an interview that he did with, so there's some actually, he's actually inspiring. Like,
because
that's what he has done. I get to do like that, melange for the injuries he got. I get to do that for a video for his government issues
Yeah,
stuff.
I'm really, well, you know what helped me is I,
so cool.
But I get to do that, it's volunteer, but still, yeah, I mean, like, like I'm gonna be, like people are gonna see my work in all kinds of training scenarios. So that is, you know, and if those training scenarios save lives, I'm involved in that somehow. That's like being in a energy role with that work,
It'd be
and you
just
know,
like a
really,
big because that's how he sent this.
even, you know, some great authors don't get
I really like
Check your work. Good work. Proud of you.
I'm not ever using a selfie stick, I did it.
Yes.
Whatever.
And then you're paying off your student loans because you had to go get
Nobody
whatever
there.
crazy
Yeah.
degrees to get there, you
What he
know.
did for.
Nobody there.
He was here about 2 years
And you're
ago.
toward out about, I want to be a singer.
So you can
What he did
find
for
out
the
before
first
you
2
do
years
Undergrad is in
that I brought him to this time is he
But
would.
you know,
I'm sure
You
there's
were
some
listening.
sleep. We had 3 people watching.
Great.
So it's gonna be
Well,
outside the scenes.
Yeah.
Like the first one, like
The freelance
is
is a lot more like
YouTube.com/MCD info, and then it'll be like live, and then click it.
that.
have it
And
like the
then
first
dot, 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 share.
specific.
Like, his name, copy clipboard,
Just leave $40 to get it.
technology.
I just moved from a contract job to like a full-time, like, benefits and everything.
Oh, nice. You got yourself set up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't
Like,
make
yeah,
off.
that's
Yeah, I got a lot of good
Wait, you
things
mean
done.
I'm paying less for my health insurance now, but I get more?
Whoa.
So that's exciting, and it also means that there's bigger.
Fine, yeah.
Like, actually,
Yeah,
such as
Yeah, he just.
running a little late. I just want to let you know our store does close at 8. We can stay on for the duration of the event, but registers will close at 8. So if you have any books that you want to buy, you might want to just take it over to the kids' desk and then buy it before the event starts. Thank you.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good question. Yeah.
Pull it down.
So you might have.
The others I think are all in the corner over there.
What's the parking? I didn't see.
Sorry, talking.
It doesn't say. But they're gonna validate it, so.
I want to validate it just for the event.
The chairs back.
Anyway, hopefully that when I came in,
Phone the
I
size.
said, I'm here for the recruiting.
They should phone the size.
Like, validate or what? And he was like, yeah, he said, I won't be here for a week.
Okay.
So there's not gonna be anybody to collect money anyway, if you pretend it's like, you know what I mean?
What should I say with it?
The final reading of season 1.
I saw them.
The final reading of Q&A for season 1.
I lent it to my uncle. I was thinking like
I ran out the door to go to work today, and it was just like, quick, just grab house and leave, so I don't have to come back.
35 minutes.
That was a mistake.
I can't get over how crazy it is that I ordered a copy yesterday. And
I just put starting soon. Explanation point.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people.
But my life has just been like that lately. I need an 8-year relationship. It's just been tough. And ever since then, things have just been like all this stuff. It's so crazy.
That's me. I'm Max, so.
I'm Sarah.
I'm Max with her. What's your name?
Audience photo again.
Who told you to say
And it's about.
I'm watching. This is real watching.
YouTube?
You're gonna go.
Okay, it says 1.
It's like
Has the
right
stairway.
watching, but it's actually just before the stairway. It's like right on that wall. Near this.
At the house.
You'll see a big sign. There should be signs today. Very big sign of doom.
It still says 1.
All this information.
Maybe I need to-
Sorry.
You don't want to drain your phone.
It's my hair green over. It's great.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yes.
Hello, random person.
Mine started out like super dark blue.
Isn't that weird how it fades to green?
Yeah.
I guess because when you bleach it, it turns kind of yellow.
Yeah. It was like, no, I guess it was a dark teal, but it was definitely way more blue. And then it just slowly faded out, and like, and then I chopped it all off. It was like, it's okay. I like that fancy frosted tips, like, yeah, I'm in the 90s.
I think it looks great.
Thank you.
I'm a 90s kind of person. As you can probably tell. My man has shoes that were very 90s. That was my
I was at the bank yesterday, and the bank teller asked me if I was a skier. It took me forever. I'm like,
Why
wait,
are you asking
like,
this?
I don't think this has anything to do with skiing, but it's from a book. And then later I thought of me, oh, she confused guys and skis.
Yeah, this is a quick, like, I left this hanging. I get
And
into that.
yeah, now I'm 27.
How's it?
Yeah, yeah.
37.
Whereas I do like
That's fine,
one
yeah.
novel. You guys,
Which is fun
if you
because
don't,
like,
you're
sometimes
gonna
we'll be
have
talking about something and she'll be like,
degrees.
oh yeah, you know, the time when I was like riding around on the roof of my brother's car, you know, being a dumb teenager, and I was like, wow, I was learning my multiplication tables at that point.
over time.
No, we laugh about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll do the same thing where I'm just like,
So-
that dumb teenager stuff I did. And she's like, yep, I was buying my first car.
Well,
I'm in for like, I signed up for this. It's supposed to be my road.
that's not like a.
12 years age group.
Right.
And everything was, the year you were born, and I was doing this and this and this. And it really
It's
started
been a
to
while.
get-
Yeah, a little bit.
I get
And
it,
I,
if you're older
I'm
than me, but it,
because
I
like,
don't
I
know.
wanted to come to this event and I didn't.
It made me feel
if I
like less
wanted to
inadequate
actually
or
be like,
something, and then
caught-
vice
I would-
versa. It's like,
I'm
well,
nice,
that was
so-
before your time, kind of.
Yeah.
And I'm
You
okay
know?
with this.
Yeah, we never
I
end up
feel
like,
like they're surprisingly quick.
we just tease each other over the fact that we're so far apart. Just like,
I'd like to do 4
Right.
pages.
It works.
yeah.
I don't know for
It
everyone.
works. I mean,
One of the ones I did that, it was like.
if you were like 15 and she's
Yeah.
Was it you the first
I'm
person?
on Violet, yeah.
We got home here like
You're-
way
you're
early.
not
We were
kosher.
going
I was not expecting that.
Yeah, just the.
He's
Yeah,
like,
Give me a
like
book.
working.
we met eight years
Sort
ago.
of.
There
Like,
there are nods,
Right.
but like,
yeah.
I wasn't expecting.
At that age, it's too much.
Well, this is just
Because I was 27
Traffic
when
was
I met my
coming up
ex,
here.
so yeah, same kind of age, where it's like, okay, this isn't.
She was telling me.
And another thing, I think he mentioned the little.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm just gonna dawdle like. Centralia. I'm just gonna drive past this.
Oh, that's each
No, I'm
character.
only on like.
Like a Xander.
Okay, well, never mind. It gets good. It gets good.
Good.
Like, I think he's actually he's my son.
Yeah.
Otherwise.
Oh, yeah. And there's also.
Yeah, exactly. I like kind of reminds me of
Even just like.
like because there was like we were at like
Oh, yeah. And then maybe like.
So that's why I
but
just
this is
like
like
outdoor.
challenging all the
long
things.
fingers. And then it's like taking still letters or something.
Hi, we're still waiting for Mark. He's running late.
Imaginary person.
Gooey gooey.
I don't expect.
Yeah. How was it?
For example. I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, the chat on the live stream was pretty cool, but I was like, I'm gonna set something up to people to chat. Screw that.
Archie being the emotional pawn.
Oh, you have to log into your Google account or something.
It said like I had to create a channel.
Oh.
Yeah. That's what
Yeah, I don't know, like,
yeah.
Just be.
Just
work.
Yeah.
Here's me as a cat.
And then every. Well, I've read reviews on how.
So it's kind of like food give away exotic. Man, is that don't.
A bit.
We can hide in that.
It's like go down
Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's event. My name is Grace, and I'm an events associate here at the University Bookstore, the region's oldest and largest independent bookstore. We host over 500 author events a year, and you can find out more on our website, paper calendars, and various social media platforms. Tonight, we're very excited to host National Book Award finalist Mark Z. Danielewski, who brings us the fantastic 5th volume and season 1 finale to a series about a young girl who befriends a cat hunting humanity. Mark was born in New York City and lives in Los Angeles. He's the author of the award-winning and best-selling novel House of Leaves, which garnered a considerable cult following and won the New York Public Library's Young Lions Fiction Award. His second novel, Only Revolutions, was a National Book Award finalist, and his novella, The 50-Year Sword, has been performed at the Roy and Edna Disney Cal Arts Theater in Los Angeles. A few announcements before we get started. As I may mentioned earlier, the books are right behind you in the cube, and we can stay on for the duration of the event, so we don't need to leave at 8, but the registers will close at 8, so we just recommend buying the books before then. We'll take a little pause. And for the signing, he's going to be signing right there. I'm going to be post-it noting your book with your name on it so it's easier. And so we'll just get a few minutes to get all of that happening right before the signing. So we'll have you remain seated, and then I'll get you come up row by row. And now, please join me in welcoming Mark C. Danielewski.
Hello.
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 Nice to be in Seattle. Some memories were coming up. Seattle was actually the very first place that I read for House of Leaves, all the way back when. And I remember it because there were 3 people, maybe there were 6, and it was one of the few readings that I did for House of Leaves where I did accents. Well, we've come full circle, and you're going to hear some accents tonight. I would love to start with House of Leaves. Does anyone have a copy that I can borrow? Okay. That's an exceptional copy, by the way. Thank you. All right, let's start at the end of this adventure. So many ends. The end of the tour, the end of volume 5, the end of season 1. Now the end of House of Leaves. March 14th, 1969. Who has never killed an hour? Not casually or without thought, but carefully. A premeditated murder of minutes. The violence comes from a combination of giving up, not caring, and a resignation that getting past it is all you can hope to accomplish. So you kill the hour. You do not work, you do not read, you do not daydream. If you sleep, it is not because you need to sleep. And when at last it is over, there is no evidence, no weapon, no blood, and no body. The only clue might be the shadows beneath your eyes or a terribly thin line near the corner of your mouth, indicating something has been suffered, that in the privacy of your life you have lost something, and the loss is too empty to share. July 27th, 1991. Make no mistake, those who write long books have nothing to say. Of course, those who write short books have even less to say. December 18th, 1996. The cats have been dying, and everyone wonders why. I can hear my neighbors murmur. They murmur all the time. It's strange. Some cats die, some disappear. No one knows why. Redwood. I saw him once a long time ago when I was young. I ran away, and luckily, or no luck at all, he did not follow me. But now I cannot run. And anyway, this time, I am certain he will follow. Thank you. So let's turn to Redwood. I do not stand before you as a great thespian, so I will ask of your collective imagination to bestow on me a greater performance than the accents you are about to hear. But I do feel they are in the service of keeping everything clear. For those of you who like to follow along, this is starts on page 78, volume 5. And it's a chapter focuses on Xanther, the 12-year-old girl who found a very unique kitten. It's around 5:30 p.m., September 17th, 2014. Why isn't Dr. Caldwell telling us this? Xanther asks, never anticipating the question, the words just slipping out, though without any edge or tone. Dwight Plager nods a lot. looking at walls then and throwing his head like to get his bangs out of his face. But he doesn't have bangs or any hair in his face, probably because there's enough gel or hairspray to keep all those layers locked in place. Oh, there it is. Xanther has the answer. Dr. Caldwell likes him a lot. I was just about to posit that. Meaning before pointing that out, you were thinking that? Good question, fair question. Alice is a good doctor, so good. Loves animals and saves them. Boy, does she save them, so many, many. But she's also really, really sensitive, which comes out like an accusation of those immovable covering stones momentarily seeking out Xanther again. Alice handles most everything here, but there's one part she leaves to others, or in this case, to me. Does Dr. Caldwell, Astaire begins, redressing Dwight's familiarity first, is she recommending that our pet be put down now? Something she's considering. Alice asked me to come and take a look and let you know what I think. But before I can let you know what I think, I do have to take a look. Dwight steps towards Xanther again, and now Xanther's the one who wants to charge. Shove him aside, get out the door, out down that strange orange hallway, out into the sunny Los Angeles day she knows is waiting. Even if this wish starts dimming at once, like the day is already dimming, ending. Even if Xanther knows there's at least a good hour before the sun goes, feeling it in here, already setting, and no windows either. A sinking into darkness that seems to sizzle and pop and gasp. Did little one just gasp? Hey, Dwight adds, opening his arms and grandly stepping aside, her escape as easy as a few steps. If you know he's not in pain, take him home. Please, sure makes my job easier. Don't think for a moment I get off on this. Again, that wrong smile, though at least it isn't his I'm so sad, we're so sad face. And at least Astaire's smile in response is genuine, because hers is sad. He is suffering, Xanther answers, hating herself for saying it, though it's the truth. She's known it for a while, too, can feel it even now, in the way his little back paws have started a series of tiny rabbit kicks against her chest. Okay, all right, let's see where we're at. Xanther, defeated, gently returns the bindle of soaking sweater back to the examination table. Dwight slowly pulls back the cashmere, and the little one seems to unfold with it too, stretching out, not in that feel-good way, but more in that way of letting go that comes with exhaustion, flopping on his side, hind legs wet, chest wet, breathless. With breath so small, air, if air could speak, would claim no exchange. Oh man, yeah, at least Dwight doesn't touch it. See that? He's breathing through his mouth now. Man, I'm so sorry. You never want to see cats doing that. How had Xanther been so blind? Though, like, of course it was obvious now, as soon as this guy said it. Her little one was way worse than before. Xanther feels the room bend even more toward darkness, as if darkness held back by every day could do that to walls and corners, rounding them before driving them down toward an inescapable center. Xanther's lips and fingertips tingle then with a crackle, singeing every surface between herself and little one. She even tries resting one palm on him, as if touch might stop it. Her palm nearly covering him, Xanther's hand a hand with a tail. Did she know he was this small? Of course she knew. Is he getting smaller? Does it matter? Especially in the way everything keeps crackling around her, so much so that it seems the world itself could in this moment just flash away. Burned up in the instantiation of its future, this future. And of course that's when, oh wow, Xanther realizes what she should have recognized when she left home. Just how much the strange blue acorn is burning now. As much at the heart of her as it remains beyond her, hotter than ever before. And for one thing, turning to ash all her plans to smuggle the little cat out of the house as a way to keep that flame extinguished or at least dampened. And for another thing, drawing Xanther back to that familiar forest that now might as well be a forest of burning stone. You think he's cycling too? Xanther asks. No question, Dwight answers solemnly, or how solemn tries to be when it's not, unable to get away from that big-toothed smile, another swish of blonde hair. Xanther nods. She catches, too, what looks like a wince crossing the stare's face, like the admission of what's plain as day is too painful, even for a stare, and she was the one who had wanted a dog. Xanther suddenly feels sorry for her mom, that she had managed to come around a little, only to wind up here. Do any animals who are cycling, Xanther continues, pressing toward the hardest question, which, when it comes out, feels as clear and direct as anything Doug might have mustered, do any of them go on to live? Did a stare gasp? Yes. No, Dwight answers, shaking his head too, his face darkening despite the halo of perfect hair, but also in this weird way that makes his big, bright smile seem still bigger, even brighter. Xanther can't make sense of him. He unsettles her, even if she knows he doesn't matter. Only little one matters. Alice, man, like I already said, such a good heart. She can get close to the edge, real close, especially if there's a chance that she can bring whatever living thing she's taken care of back from the edge. But over the years, she's just gotten way too sensitive. It's maybe what makes her such a great vet. But when it's clear she can't help anymore, Dwight lets his voice trail off. When she can't help, we get you, a stare snaps, her fierceness returning. Sure, I mean, I'm qualified to do this, but I'm not a vet, Dwight answers, almost lazily. If you feel more comfortable, like you prefer a licensed practitioner, there are other vets here. I'm happy to get one. They cost more, but we all do the same thing. We use sodium pentobarbital with a combination of other drugs to make sure your pet goes peacefully and painlessly. We like to give a good life dignity by ending the suffering. Dignity, Xanther asks. The question, if it is a question, racing her heart something awful. Maybe because the answer so eludes her, and touch sure is no help, even if her cupped palm over Slimsy little one keeps trying to feel it, as if feeling alone was an irrefusable commandment, granting even the most slender creature the power of human speech. When Xanther withdraws her hand, nothing in that soak of misery even hints at dignity. The question you have to answer is, hey, do you want him to keep hurting? Who are you to, the stare starts to bark. Mom, it's okay. He's right. That is the question. And one certainty now bound up in the charging beats of her heart is that Xanther will do anything to keep her dear little friend from suffering. But what stops her heart, too, is the question of whether or not to end suffering is a legitimate reason to end life. Never before has Xanther wanted so much for a seizure to take her down, drop her to the floor, tumble her into that awful catsim, keep her out for hours, absolve her from having to make this gruesome decision. But of course, no seizure comes. No seizure for little one either, though a tiny groan coupled with a pained sigh lifts and defeats his chest. Dwight Plager steps to the counter where he starts to lay out a syringe, some bottles of drugs, other stuff. Unless you decide otherwise, and hey, really take your time, but unless you decide otherwise, I will first have to take your animal to another room. Don't worry, nothing will happen there. I just need to set up an IV thingy so everything goes smoothly in here. Then I'll wait until you're ready. And when you are, he'll just go to sleep. It's super gentle. Cheery little section. You ready for more cheeriness? This chapter is called Jasper. You can't be trusted, Miles Davis. 6:22 p.m. September 17th, 2014. Centers on Oscar, the LAPD detective. Then that's it? Cledius Boo asks. That's it, Oscar answers, accepting another pour from the old man. I gotta say, I never figured you for retirement, Cledius chuckles. That reality just never crossed my mind. Doing something crazy for a lady makes makes sense, but not retiring for one. Oscar checks his watch. If he lingers any longer, he'll be late. Cletus takes no offense. Don't fret. I'll call you another one in a sec. Thanks. Not the first time a cab got lost around here. A bullet hole that made no difference to Oscar still got Captain Cardinal ordering the car to the shop for a patch and paint job. Can't have people thinking it's open season on police. Oscar obeyed. But that's not really the reason he's cabbing it tonight. Catla. Oscar drains the small glass. When he'd arrived an hour ago, Cletus set out a 1-liter bottle of beer in 2 small glasses, as if small would limit big. As it turns out, small stays empty as big tries to keep up. Catla, Catla, Catla. Where's your dinner? Cletus asks, refilling both their glasses, finishing the bottle. Red Lion, Glendale Boulevard. You can get beer there, last boot. Oscar nods. He's had enough beer. Scotch is next. Good or bad, it doesn't matter, so long as he has a few. Virgil will understand. He better. He's buying. Celebrating the news of Oscar's move to New Jersey and a new life of gardening and gray. Haven't been in years, though once went enough to know the regulars. Oscar wonders if he'll run into anyone from those days. The air tonight seems charged with that possibility, ready to catch fire with the unexpected. Cap, cap, cap. They find that lion in the mountains yet? Cletus asked. Last I heard, she's still up there, Oscar responds. Sheesh. Can't wait to hear what happens next. The TV in his kitchen is only the weather. The TV in the living room is all about a Medal of Honor recipient, Sergeant Major Benny Atkins, who killed 175 enemy combatants. That and being stalked or saved by a tiger. Oscar didn't hear which. He prefers the weather. Hot, no chance of rain. I guess something has to happen. Lion that big, that mean, you know she's going to turn up somewhere, and it won't be pretty. Cap, cap. Oscar's glad to find Cletus found a good mood. He wasn't sure how he'd take the news. Maybe because Oscar still believes that Cletus sees in him a last chance to still get some justice for Jasper, his murdered boy. Though maybe it isn't that way at all. Maybe at this point, they're just friends. To Jasper, Oscar suddenly says, lifting his empty glass. Cletus holds out his hand, heads to the refrigerator, twists off the cap of another 1-liter bottle of beer, sits down, refills both their glasses. Kappa, Kappa, Kappa. To you, Oz, I'm gonna miss you, man. Oscar's mouth goes dry, the kind of dry that's beyond the help of anything wet. New Jersey's not that far away. Yeah, right. Might as well be Kazakhstan. Cletus breaks out in a big laugh, gets up again. For another bottle? To call a second cab? But he just heads out of the kitchen. Oscar hears a door open, hears the water start to run. Oscar had gone too far. It had been a nice visit. Too bad getting back to nice now won't be so easy. Oscar gets up and pours into the sink what's left of his beer. Now on both TVs is a story about Operation Fashion Police. 2 Mexican drug cartels were caught laundering money in LA warehouses and storefronts down in the fashion district. $65 million in cash seized. The story briefly interests him, and then interest dims, followed by a sensation of easy relief. Because a dumb news story isn't the only thing easing away. All his cases are losing their hold, plus those that were never his cases. Marvin Dorgendrell, a.k.a. Android, Yuri Grossman, Eli Klein and Yablon Lausar, Raylik S. Tarnin, questions about that wackadoodle warlock, questions about bleach, about ammonia. All that urgency just fading. Others will pick up the threads, tie things together, net the worst ones, or not. It doesn't matter anymore. Oscar served his time, hauled in his share of maniacs, good men like Detectives Perry and Carter, even Captain Cardinal, even Belasco will carry on with the job of justice. They'll have help too. Angels like Plansky, like Virgil. What was that Rawls quote Virgil loved? Justice is the first virtue of social institutions. Oscar checks his watch again. Where's that cat? He hears a flush, but Cletus still doesn't return. Why had Oscar brought up Jasper? But even Jasper was fading away, and the lightness of all these departures, they'd been departing for a while now, leave him feeling free and strange, but also at the same time sad. Kappa, 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 Kappa. Oscar slides across the counter an origami honey badger, leaves it beside the bottle, reconsiders the beer. Instead, Oscar heads for the front door. Through the metal security screen, he spies his taxi idling curbside. Thought you should have this, Cletus says. Oscar's relieved to turn around and find Cletus smiling. Oscar probably just mistook a full bladder for heartache, until the gift makes him rethink that. It'll mean a world to me to think you'll have a reason now and then to look on this and think of him. It's a framed piece of sheet music, the first page of Rhapsody in Blue. He could play it too. Those pencil markings are his. I framed it for you. It'll hang where I'll always see it. I got tired, Oz, of thinking about who did it. More and more I accepted that whoever done it was already gotten by something else, or would be soon enough, maybe by that lion in the mountains. Cledia's smile seems to widen because the joke doesn't land. And then, you know, I got tired of even thinking about Jasper. Really, really tired. Like fall asleep forever tired. I got so afraid I'd sleep so long I'd wake and find Jasper gone, forgotten. That I still can't risk. Oscar nods. The cab is honking. He has to get going. He needs a real drink. I used to drive trucks. You know that. Mostly city routes. San Gabriel Valley, maybe a little farther north. Now and then, though, I did longer hauls. Those can be great. All night, with no one to tell you what to do but the road. Sometimes you get so damn tired. You drink your Cokes, your coffee, roll down the windows, take some cold air in the teeth. But if that don't work, you know what you do? You take out your wallet. It's got to be full, too. Your license, your ATM card, all your plastic lifelines, but most of all, it's got to have your cash. Then you hang that out the window, holding on tight. That keeps you wide awake. The taxi had stopped honking. Cletus, you tired now? Oscar asks. Oh yeah, but I'm still up. Window down? You get it, Oz, Cletus smiles. This time because meaning did land. One hand on the wheel and one hand in the wind. Holding on to your wallet, holding on to something. Thank you. Now that portion of the evening, known as the Q&A. Who will be the first? Yes.
A long time ago, I was reading a bunch of fans talk about having Q&As with you. They said, would you ever be willing to release the movie rights to Only Revolutions and House of Leaves? You said that's silly because House of Leaves is about a movie, and Only Revolutions is already a movie. What did you mean by Only Revolutions being already a movie?
I don't think did I say that?
Yes.
Oh, I know I said that. I was young, man. Kids say the damnest. In effect, House of Leaves is about a movie, and Only Revolutions is really about music. However, Only Revolutions is comprised of a series of reels that are like movies. So if you look at the end of each reel, you'll see what's known in the parlance of projectionists as the cigarette burns in the upper right corner. And so, for me, just reading it enacted the movie, whereas House of Leaves is always talking about the movie in a way, right? But if you're reading fast enough and bright enough, and if you got a big engine, you're going to see the movie just fine. Yes.
you have such disparate voices in the familiar. I was wondering, I heard you talk about the creation of those voices some in earlier Q&As that we've all been watching online.
Terrifying thought.
Is there anybody that you don't like to write? Is there any character that's harder for you to get into?
Is there any character that I don't like to write that's harder to get into? Well, those are two different questions.
Those are.
So the first question, no, I love them. The second question is, this is going to come as a big surprise, I know. Jing Jing's pretty hard to read. I know he's hard to read. But I love it. I love it. I think I think the thing that is, well, the nuts and bolts are this. I generally write a chapter, and I focus on that chapter for a day. Maybe it's 2 days, maybe it's a few days. The hardest thing I have to do, and it does happen, especially as deadlines approach, is finish a chapter in the morning and then somehow change gears and start another chapter. That is incredibly painful. It just, painful in that way that exhaustion can give you. Just like, I just break out in sweats. It's just really hard. But then once I'm in it, it's fantastic. Jing Jing's weird because it's so much about syntax and language, and it's got Malay and Hokkien and Cantonese, and of course Singlish is just this big, accumulation of all of these sort of cultural moments and expressions. But it doesn't actually start with the vocabulary. I realize it sort of starts with kind of how I inhabit Jing Jing. And for me, it's just the itching on his skin. It's like an itching that kind of moves up through his nerves. And as soon as I feel that, then all the words are kind of secondary to that impulse. And that kind of organizes his skittishness and also his, his poetic voice, that wants to frame the world in a way that can ameliorate the kind of trauma that we really we don't understand yet. We haven't met that trauma yet, and that would account for his desire to keep repeating this addictive cycle, because it frees him from having to face this other part, right? Yes.
I imagine that when you're creating all these characters, you had sort of, I'm guessing, probably a pool of characters that you selected from, and then therefore there were characters that we never got to see, they were reject characters. Can you tell us about any honorable mention? Characters who didn't make the book, but almost did.
Those in the litter that didn't live?
Yeah.
That's a gruesome question. I don't think I can. In fairness, I'm wondering if I'm going to think about this question in a month and go, oh yeah. Because remember, I started this in 2006. So the characters kind of they took form, they became lives unto themselves. And I think there are moments, I guess, when, I love the character Cleidius. He's such a small character, but there is that moment of could we see Cleidius? Why these 9 in particular? But I think that's one of the questions about that the familiar asks. Why are these kind of the 9 chosen? What will they enact that's larger than themselves? And I think the thing that gives me particular pleasure is that there is finally a voice, or at least a music, in the way all these voices come together, right? And so you kind of do hear the honorable mentions in a way. I'll tell you one that may surprise you, is Mephisto, in a way. Mephisto was a much smaller story. He's part of the larger architecture, but I never understood kind of how his intrusion would happen. And then he sort of began to insinuate himself into the whole thing. So he has his own voice, even though it's usually captured by Xanther or Anwar, and occasionally Stair. Oh, and Cass. Yeah, so he kind of lives between all the voices. Yeah. And those are kind of interesting, right? Is the voice that kind of lives, that's framed by other voices. By the way, I am talking very intimately about the familiar, and I just have to ask, how many people are in the reading club on Facebook? Fantastic. So those of you who are unaware, first, I think some of you may know this. This was given to me at the start of the tour, and it was signed by some of the members of the reading club on this page. And in every city there's been members, and I've asked if they could sign the book. So if you would sign the book, it would be doing me a great honor. Even if you're a lurker, if please sign. It's kind of like my yearbook for the end of season 1. my graduation. I'll put it here so you don't have to wait in line or get your book signed, make eye contact. But I love this sort of grander music of it all, and I think that's what's important. I think that's what I persevere at in all my books, is the sound really of all the voices. And in this particular book, more than any of the others, you have this central silence which is beginning to have a voice in the way it organizes this voice of the animal, of the cat. I guess we can, well, we can't actually. Can't say more than that yet, because some of you haven't finished. Yes?
So speaking of kind of voices, how do you feel, what does the use of space in characters like Oscar or, anyone like that? How does that spacing, what does that say to you in terms of the layouts of the pages?
A lot. That kind of design, I mean, that was years of sort of finding the right font and kind of devising sort of a framework for how these voices sound also in their appearance, in their lettered appearance, right? So Luther, for example, ultimately became about fists. It was just like block paragraphs in the imperial font, so it had a kind of heaviness. You know, you can look at Anwar. Anwar's always on the sides. He's in the margins, basically, you know. Astaire has a more centered character, and yet they're incomplete without each other. So you can look about how those two spaces work. And then that works down to their designs, right? So there's the nested parentheses of Astaire, the nested brackets of Anwar. They're kind of the same, and yet they're different too. So they're very, you're kind of seeing an intimate relationship played out by a married couple that's visually represented, syntactically represented, and then how they kind of, if you map them over each other, they kind of play with one another. But then, of course, the exciting thing, as a lot of you who finished Volume 5 know, is that those rules begin to change. What's at the center of all their lives begins to get disrupted. So these forms that we've gotten attached to, or that we've been familiarized to, over the space of the first 4 volumes, now becomes subject to change. And that's pretty exciting. Yes?
So kind of, the idea of this whole series is that it's like a television serial, and television serials often introduce new characters. Every time I pick up a book, I look to see if there's a new color in the corner. Are you planning on introducing new main characters to the novel?
I love this question. I'm not going to answer it. Another one came up, though, on tour, which was quite fun, which is, so when are you going to have that fucked up episode? Because every TV series has I was like, yeah, there's got to be that, right? So the door is definitely open to that. And I think how it happens, I think this is the key about what I do, is it just can't be a disruption for the sake of disruption, right? The fact is that, a lot of I don't think this is a spoiler, a lot of the one of the major themes of season 1 is the cage. How we cage ourselves within our social circumstances, our voice, the way we think, and how do we get out of that cage, or never walk into it. So in some ways there's a lot to learn to be living in that place. And as much as it might be a temptation for me to just branch off into a million different directions, the other part is just to stay with these characters, because I love them and I can't abandon them. I mean, one of my favorite moments in Volume 5, which I could have read, I guess, is when Xanther's really trapped. She can't do anything now. Someone's coming, her cat's failing, and she can't do anything. And she realizes that nothing that she's read or that she's seen on TV has prepared her for this moment where she can't do anything. How does she handle nothing? And for me, that's what's so exciting about the novel, because a novel can do that. It's really hard to do it in television. I mean, David Lynch maybe did it, right? Was it?
He tried.
But, at least there's like sort of a living with that stillness. So I'm not going to just jump at, I can't just jump out of the, I guess, cages of their personalities. I'm married to them in that way. Nonetheless, I like your idea, and I do like the idea of the fucked up episode, and it does fit with the TV trope, so I may contradict everything that I just said. Yes.
In the 50-Year Sword, it's a ghost story. You chose to be told by ghosts. What are the significance of the ghosts, and what do they mean to you?
Another great question I'm not going to answer.
Oh.
Just like answers. Because that's really the question that you have to answer. Like, what are the ghosts? I mean, I think maybe as a sidestep to answer your question from the side, what do we make of those quotation marks, right? They're a source of huge frustration. Like who's who and different colors. I can't even tell the colors apart. But I think, you know, if you think of the 50-Year Sword as a ghost story, right, as a campfire story, as an oral story, then what you start to understand is that, oh, wait a minute, all ghost stories, campfire stories, are the stitching together of many, many different voices. And we don't know who those voices are. We don't know who really came up with these parts. But ultimately, they were kind of assembled, canonized in the way we just appreciated the tale, and then retold and retold. But even as we retell them in our own voice, we actually have the ghosts of many, 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 many voices sort of pouring through us. Now, how do we address those ghosts if they are always anonymous? And actually, it's a question that's also germane to season 1, because the question of naming is very important. So what do we do with the nameless ghosts? And what happens when there's something that's nameless and finally finds its name? What is the impact of that? Yes.
Did you anticipate, as this is going to be a 27-volume series, did you anticipate the audience interaction, online interactions, us building a whole contextual base that now adds so much dimension and familiarity with the work? Was that intended all along? Was that accidental? I doubt.
Question. I mean, the Facebook reading club was kind of a lark, to tell you the truth. I mean, we tried a lot of different things that just kind of didn't happen, you know. And then it was sort of, volume 5 was coming, and I sort of said, well, let's just do a reading club on Facebook, and we'll do a volume a month, and we'll see what happens, and maybe a dozen people will join, and we'll see what, you know. But instead, you know, what is it, like 900, going to 1,000 members now. It's very active. There's tens of thousands of posts, you know. It offers, what I love about it the most, actually, is the quality of the discussion. You know, there have been differences, and they've been navigated, you know. It's not disputatious, it's not just filled with rants, it's not filled with sort of self-righteous creeds about who's right or wrong. It's a group of people that are very different, and I can tell you are all over the country, and I've met them, you know, that are collaborating in a way to participate in this, you know, and that certainly has an influence on me. So I don't think I expected it quite like that, you know. The dialogue is much more rapid. You know, it's just like I was in line, I was in New York, and someone handed me a dissertation that they'd just written on House of Leaves. So that was awesome. And then there was a woman who was way at the back of the line, and she came up, and she looked a little startled. I said, like something like, are you okay? And she goes, well, I'm writing my master's thesis on House of Leaves. And I thought, oh, well, I have another one right here. You can use this one. She was like, yeah, I'm writing about the community that surrounded House of Leaves. So for those of you who don't know, I released House of Leaves online before it was released in 2000, which was a pretty radical thing to do. I put it up as a PDF. In those days, to export a PDF, it took like almost 24 hours. It was a real nightmare. And but then we created these forums, and the forums actually began to be a place where there was a lot of discussion. So she was writing about that experience. But while she was in line, she overheard and then slowly began talking to people who were in the reading club, found out about this Facebook reading club, went onto her phone and started to see how much community was surrounding this project. And by the time she reached me, she realized she had to change her dissertation. So,
it's like a nightmare.
So I didn't anticipate that, and I can tell you between the end of the line and to me, she didn't anticipate that this would be changed. So, who knows? Hold on a second. Any other questions? Okay.
So you mentioned music a lot. Your sister's a musician, and You mentioned the Only Revolutions is about music, and you have a lot of Miles Davis references with Oscar. Do you play music? Are you a musician?
It seemed that way. I sing a tune now and then. I write a song now and then. I mean, I think I do come from a very musical family. My grandmother, who I never met, was an opera singer. My father was very musical. My sister, obviously, is just an extraordinary talent. Strangely enough, I have a lot of friends who are musicians and composers. And I think in terms of music when I'm writing. So, you know, House of Leaves, one of the questions that always comes up is... Stopper. So in conclusion, so one of the questions that comes up with House of Leaves is always like, did you write the Johnny Truant sections later or something like that? But actually, it's kind of very much like a score. It's like these are the strings and these are the reeds and this is the timpani drums. So they all kind of move together. Only Revolutions, especially, it's like a Bach piece which you can play on one side and turn it over and play it from the other side, and they're all kind of harmonizing with each other. And The Familiar is very much like that. I hear the themes kind of played out or whatnot. Doesn't really answer your question, but yeah, I write a ditty now. Yes.
The Familiar and House of Leaves both have an incredible depth, but they can also sort of be read more casually. You don't have to translate all the Chinese that you leave untranslated and all that stuff to still enjoy the book. And I was wondering how you sort of weigh that when you're writing, writing for the people who are, looking into every detail and writing for the people that are reading this on the bus.
How do I weigh that? It's interesting. I mean, in some ways, the Familiar, through years of writing and revision, began to kind of acquire its form, right? It became this 5-act thing. And the chapters were pretty unique. They're pretty short. They're between 2,000 and 4,000 words. Some are longer. And it's interesting that it kind of mirrors the way a television episode for 1 hour is. It's generally 5 acts with a teaser in the front. Here we have front matter, back matter. And so what happens is that each chapter has a certain set of beats that have to be hit, to use the terminology for television. And so those beats are kind of they're written as you write the chapter, but also as you kind of arc the whole season and the volume. And so those have to land, right? They're like at the end of the chapter that I read in the beginning, Xanther is faced with the choice of, is she going to put to sleep the cat or not? Like, that's just a beat, right? But then there's a lot of other stuff that's going on there beforehand. So I guess the form itself now kind of dictates it. Every volume's 880 pages. It's a certain amount of time. So it actually accelerates pretty quickly. And as daunting as one is, and, the bar is kind of high for one, because you're so disoriented as to what you're experiencing. From what I've heard, the last 2 weeks is that there are a lot of people who read 5 in 5 to 10 hours. It's this big volume, and they just tore through it because they knew how to read it at that point. And they knew, okay, that's kind of a dense section, and I can go back to that. But I really want to know what the fuck's going to happen with Jing Jing.
Just kind of in contrast to one of the earlier questions, which character do you have the easiest time slipping into? Which character most aligns with your voice? Which character is... Right.
Which character is most aligned with my voice? Well, the white space, of course. It's actually a true story. A true answer. All right. And then what are we good? Or should a couple more questions and then signing?
If you want to give them a break right after this question for people who want to buy books, and then you can continue.
Well, let's do a break, and then everyone can buy or whatever, and then we'll start signing, and if you have any extra questions to answer. But why don't we just do quickly 2 more questions, and just think of this as the last sort of communal question. So it's a lot of pressure at the end of the tour. All right.
Wow.
So the only reason I know you existed is because of a band called Circa Survive. They speak very highly of you, and I was wondering if you know who they are and what you think of them.
Anthony Green and I have had milkshakes together.
That is something I really want to hear.
All right, Tatiana, last question? No?
No, okay.
Yeah.
Do you plan to write more novels during the period of time when you're writing?
I plan to write my novels. Well, that's the scariest question of the night. So it's probably a good last one, in fact. I said this was like a television series, and a television series requires ratings. It was an act of faith on my part that this could have the kind of readership that would be necessary to carry the distance. And I don't look at my my publisher as sort of my foe. My publisher is my partner. So after each season, there has to be an evaluation as to, is it successful enough? Does it have enough numbers, to live? And I don't know the answer. So it's possible at any moment that it can get canceled, and that's part of the experience of reading it. And that's a scary thought. But if it does get canceled, I'll lick my wounds for a while, and then I'll probably try to write something else. But back to the question about ghosts. It's terrifying for me to consider, because that family is so vivid for me. And what would that mean to have to let go of that family? I think that would be a family of ghosts that would live with me for the rest of my life. And on that cheery note, let's sign some books. Okay?
And so anybody who wants to go buy books can still go do that. And if I can have everyone who is wanting their book signed just remain seated, so I'll post it noted. We'll start over here. Okay, we'll start over here.
Josh. And I'm going to put this up here for the book club to sign. You guys want to throw it over?
You're going to catch it.
And then once I do that, you can take it right out, okay?
I got to get some other books.
Okay, sure.
Mark, say hi to YouTube.
Hey, how are you? I'm just doing signing. This is my pen bag. Come on, these pens.
Okay, sure.
I've got to uncap them. Get them ready.
This is so gripping.
Sorry. Don't raise your voice.
Okay. I don't want to scare the pens.
Pens are very, very, very fragile creatures. They need to be respected.
Okay, make sure they are uncapped. Owen says hi.
And they can be very dangerous too, so you don't want to scare them. They could just lunge.
They need to work.
They seem in a good mood today, though. They really like Seattle. Yes. I'll talk to you later.
And you can go right on ahead.
Don't be afraid.